Hey, what's up guys? JB here. And we're back again today with part 2 of my definitive guide on guild raids. So in part 1, we focused more on sort of the overall strategy in terms of building your team, placing your team, and the overall sort of general approach to tackling the bosses. If you haven't seen that video yet, honestly, what are you doing in this video? I'll put a link to it above. Go watch that one first. But in part 2 here today, I'm going to actually go into each and every element and give you my take on what are the best units to actually use in your guild raids. But, not only which units to use, but why they are the best ones. And as we sort of go through each and every element, I'm going to rank them on my own personal tier list to kind of show you where I think they rank amongst each other in terms of the guild raid hierarchy. So let's just kick it off right here. And we're going to start first with the fire elements. And the core of your fire element guild raid team, in my view, is going to be these two guys here, King Mont and Rain. Mont, of course, has that 38% slash imperil, and Rain has the 38% fire imperil on his limit burst. And notably for Rain, that is a 2-hit limit burst, we know as well, which is pretty rare. So it is helping you build up your chain, in addition to providing that nice debuff. And I have to say, Rain really is a very, very nice PvE unit. He does have soul prominence as well for a 3-hit chain. He has access to Undermine for a 20 defense and Spirit Break. He also has the ability to slow the boss with his Flaming Impact skill. Alright, now along with them, I have here Sweetheart Ildira. She was actually just recently released on the global side. She has access as well to a slow attack. She has a 3-hit chain, with a pretty nice modifier on it. And her limit burst, I think, can potentially be a pretty nice asset as well. It has the ability to reduce up to 50 CT on it, and it's doing damage at the same time. So I think that is actually a pretty nice option to have in your toolkit, if the boss is susceptible to CT effects. Lastly, I have Luwartha here, and her EX quad shot was upgraded with its modifier. It gets up to a 165 mod, so it just makes it a little bit easier for you to cap on it. She does also have an agility break on her limit burst. And because she has the soldier subjob, she has access to use the Exorcist Vision card to have 3-hit slashing attacks as well if you want them. And you might want to do that in some cases just to keep the chain at that point as a pure slash and fire chain. It's definitely preferred when you can keep the chain pure that way, as it's just going to amplify the modifiers for you. Other notable units here for fire are going to be Regalia Glaciella. She actually has a 3-hit attack available to her as well with her triple bite skill. And lastly, I have Winter Masherie here and Lilith, who are both able to chain via vision cards and do actually have a couple of nice breaks available to them. And that VC designation that I have marked on both of these units is something that you're going to see throughout the infographics in this presentation. And that designation is pretty straightforward. It's just going to mean that that unit has access to use one or both of the 3-hit chaining VCs that we talked about in the first video. So I simply have them marked there for your reference. In terms of the summons here for the fire elemental, the current best one in my view is the Brachiosaurus. And that's because it's providing a 50% imperil as well as 100% attack and magic boost. And that attack and magic steroid can make a very big difference in terms of ramping up your damage as you're sort of restarting your chain on the boss. Now the last part of my infographic here is my future section. And here I'm actually putting Delita from Final Fantasy Tactics. And he's actually an anticipated upgrade to my fire team, once he gets his EX upgrade around the 2.5-year anniversary. He has a very nice attack stat, and of course he has a 48% fire imperil. And that level of imperil is actually very, very rare in the game. Now honestly, you could actually use Delita already, and he would be actually pretty decent. My main issue though is that he's just level 99 currently, so he's lacking that additional 2000 max damage limit that you get as you go into EX jobs. I do have here maybe sort of a question mark next to Delita, and that's because many of us are actually expecting a fire unit, either in the summer event or within the global festival that should be coming very, very soon. If there is a fire unit, let's just hope that they can chain. Alright, so in terms of an elemental tier list, where am I currently seeing fire? And I'm going to put fire into my S tier. And really, they were more of an A tier for me, I would say, until very recently when we got Sweetheart Ildira. She definitely helps them out quite a bit with that access to slow and that native 3-hit chaining. Before she came along, much of the debuff load was sort of put onto Rain, so that frees him up to do some of the other things that he can do. As we just talked about in the future section, with Delita incoming and maybe a potential new fire unit, fire actually has a pretty bright future, in terms of guild raid chaining. So the potential is there that they could even move up beyond the S tier. We'll just have to sort of see how it plays out. Other things that Fire could use to sort of bring it up to that next tier would be a unit that could provide unit resist down innately within their kit. Ildira actually does have that available to her. The problem is it's a conditional one, and it's conditional on immobilizing the enemy. And unfortunately, these guild raid bosses are just going to be immune to immobilize in pretty much every case that I've seen. So unfortunately, it's not really something that she's able to use. Some nice vision cards would be welcome as well. Unfortunately, the 35 fire attack vision card that came with the Crystal Chronicles collaboration is a card that not very many people out there have access to. It's never been rerun, so I really wouldn't mind seeing a similar card come out for fire that could really amp up the damage, not only in PvP, but also in PvE events like guild raids. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the ice elements. And first up, I'm going to give my man Barrett here his due. Unfortunately, in the PvP arena, he's not really all that great. But in terms of guild raids, he's actually really, really good. First off, he has a skill that actually breaks defense and slows the enemy all in one. So anytime you can get 2 relevant debuffs down in one action is very, very good for your turn efficiency and just helps you get into the damaging phase against the boss that much quicker. Barrett also has access to a 3-hit attack, and his counter is actually pretty strong as well. And this is actually one of the advantages of the ice units in general. There's just so many that have access to the Pugilist subjob for that 2-hit counter attack. And that particular counter attack is nice because it has an above average chance of proccing off, as well as higher damage than most counters out there. And that brings me into Aranea here, and most importantly, she's actually bringing that single target resist in peril. Most chaining attacks are actually single target based, so this helps out immensely. If you don't have Barrett, you can use the astrologer card on her and have her break the defense of the enemy for you. She does also have access to an agility break on top of that, so very nice debuff flexibility here for Aranea. She does natively bring a 2-hit pierce attack as well, and if you have a gift like no other, she can actually 3-hit chain for you on top of that. Alright, next up we have Velric and Laswell. For one, these guys are notable because they're not limited units like the first two, but Velric is actually just going to be a pure chainer for you. He doesn't really have a lot going on, in terms of debuffs. Laswell, though, can provide that very nice 38% ice in peril for you. After that, he has 2-hit attacks that he can fall back on, and he does have access to slow from his Samurai subjob. And Laswell actually is another potential candidate for that gift like no other vision card. He can use that to 3-hit chain if you need it. Other notables here, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Gilgamesh. He of course has Kotetsu for that slash in peril, and he can use the Exorcist card because he has the soldier subjob, so he can definitely be a nice choice for you as well. I have Oron and Victora here. They can be pretty decent, they both have access to defense breaks, and they can get 3-hit chains through vision cards as well. Moving into the summon section for ice, Shiva, Freezes, and Menipul, they all have the 50% in peril. Only the latter two, though, have access to that 100% attack and magic field effect. So those are definitely going to be the preferred ones for you to use. The Manipul summon notably is a 2-hit summon attack, but sadly it's actually non-elemental. So depending on how things are playing out in battle, Freezes actually can be superior. It sort of depends on the situation. What's going to be coming in the future though for ice? Quite a lot actually. Eliza and Alayla here are native 3-hit missile chainers. In the middle there we have McLeod, and he's actually going to be a free MR unit that anybody can have access to. He does have the dual gunner subjob and has access to quad shot for a 4-hit missile attack as well. So it's actually really interesting to think about a potential missile chaining group for ice that would include Eliza, Alayla, Barrett, McLeod, and maybe even Salir. She actually has a 2-hit missile attack. And thinking about this is probably the main reason that I'm hoping for a 3-hit missile chaining VC in the future, because I could throw that on my girl Rosa and put her in the group, and I think that would actually be super fun. So that said, where is ice sitting in my tier list? And I think assuming that you have access to everything, including both chaining vision cards, I would rank ice as an S tier as well. Currently, they are very vision card dependent though. So if you don't have access to those things, I would put them at an A tier at best. So due to that fact, on my tier list, I'm going to kind of put them skirting the line here between S and A. Another knock I have on them currently is that a couple of the better units like Barrett and Aranea are actually limited time. So just stuff to think about, in terms of where your account is and, what you've collected along the way. Things that ice needs, to get better, as of now, I think they pretty much have most of the debuffs that you'd want covered. So more units that have access to 3 and 4-hit chains would definitely be welcome. And as we talked about, that's definitely what is coming over the next few months. Eliza, Alayla, and McLeod all have 3-hit chains or better natively. So I definitely do see ice moving firmly into an S position here in the coming months, with or without those chaining VCs. Alright, so Wind is coming up here next, and the first two that I have here are Lucia and Tifa, and the reason for that is that they're both 4-hit chainers. Lucia has Quad Shot, and Tifa has Star Shower. The only real debuff utility here, though, amongst these two is that Lucia has access to a slowing attack. Alright, so moving on, and I have Joom here, and despite being a tank, she's actually pretty decent for guild raids. She has access to that 30 single target resist down skill. On top of that, she does also have access to an agility break. And finally, since she's a greatsword user, she can use the Exorcist card and get access to 3-hit chaining. Last in line here, we do have my man Howlet, and he's actually bringing the Wind Imperil here. He has a 38% Wind Imperil on his Limit Burst, and on top of that, he does have access to 2-hit chaining attacks. In terms of the best 5th unit here to add to this team, I think you'd be looking at a unit like Winter Luartha here if you have her. She can bring a defense break, she has access to an agility break as well, and of course she can 3-hit chain with the vision card that came along with her. 2B is actually another decent option as well, but she only has access to 2-hit attacks. Now what about the summons for Wind and the espers that they have access to? Now Typhon is actually going to be the best option right now. First off, he's going to be coming down and hitting with wind damage when you call him out with the summon. He has that 50% Imperil, and he also has that 100% attack and magic field effect. Now Ahriman here also has those latter two things. He's just lacking when it comes to any damage when you bring him out. And then in terms of Tetra, you know, she actually doesn't bring any attack and magic field effect along with her, so that just makes Typhon the clear choice for Wind. What's coming though in the future for this elements? They're actually going to be getting another pretty nice summon with Dark Tetra, but more importantly, they're going to be getting Revolution Glaciella. She's actually an immense PvE unit. You know, not only can she natively 3-hit chain, she does also bring a Wind Imperil that is a multi-hit attack as well. The limit burst that she has is also very exciting, as it will let you continue your chain on the boss even after the boss has moved in and taken its own turn. And I think that's really going to open the floodgates in terms of what Wind is capable of, and I think you're going to be able to build new guild raid strategies purely around that limit burst. So definitely a bright future here when it comes to Wind. Now in terms of my tier list here, you know, Wind definitely has some potential. It has those 2 4-hit chainers that we talked about. And once Revolution Glassy comes along, you know, I can definitely see them maybe moving up to the top of this list. We'll sort of have to wait and see how that plays out. But for now, I'm going to have Wind on my A tier, and that's due to the current reliance on vision cards that it has for chaining attacks, and the current source of Imperil and Howlet only having access to 2-hit chains. As I said though, you know, bright future, so definitely stuff to look forward to here. Alright, so moving on, and now we're going to be talking about the Earth elements. And Earth really has a lot going for it, to be honest. And we're going to be starting off with Noctis here. And this guy is a monster PvE unit. His Limit Burst imperils for 3 different types of damage in Strike, Slash, and Pierce. He does also have access to both defense and agility breaks, and of course he has Tri-Blade for a 3-hit chaining attack. Winter Venera here, if you have her, is also a very nice option. Her Limit Burst actually brings a 38% Earth Imperil. She has access to a defense break on top of that, and with her Ninja Subjob, she has access to Dream Within a Dream for 3-hit chaining. Alright, so alongside them, I'm adding in Katone here, and importantly, she's bringing in that 30 single target resist down. Of course, being a ninja, she's going to have access to 3-hit chaining on top of that. She does also have really high native mobility, and pretty much all the Earth units have access to above average mobility, to be honest. And that definitely helps a lot for your initial placement in terms of putting units where you want so they can get their debuffs out on turn 1. I think some people actually might be surprised to see Moraga here on the list, but he's actually a very, very good PvE unit in his own right. He brings a slow debuff, which is very important. And of course, you know, like many other Earth units, he does have Ninja and access to Dream Within a Dream. Now, rounding out the team, you know, you really can't go wrong with either Oberon or Zazan here. If you don't have the Exorcist Vision card though, you might want to lean towards Zazan, since he natively has a 3-hit chaining attack. Oberon though does have a unique attribute, and that's that he has on his Limit Burst in all elements in peril. And notably, that's going to stack with any Earth element in peril that you may have out there. Zazan, on the other hand, has access to an agility break, which can be very important on some bosses. Now I do have Eileen here on the list, and she can actually fill in pretty nicely for Winter Venera if you don't have her. Eileen of course has a 38% Earth Imperil on her Limit Bursts, and she can also chain with either the Exorcist or the Gift Like No Other Vision card. She can actually use both of them. In terms of the summon options here for Earth, look no further than Eleficaris, and bar none, I think this is the best guild raid summon in the game. You know, not only because it's bringing that 50% Imperil and the 100% attack magic buff, but also because this summon is a 2-hit physical scaled attack. So it's very easy to cap the damage and add to the chain, and I think it's definitely one of the competitive advantages in terms of the Earth element. Now coming in the future for Earth, we do actually have Mustadio here coming in with Final Fantasy Tactics. He has access to a 3-hit missile attack with his multi-burst skill. There is also the Sheraton summon here coming along with Queen Mashari, but it's definitely not going to dethrone Eleficaris, in terms of summoning purposes. So where is Earth going to show up here on my tier list? And I'm definitely going to be putting Earth in my S tier. Earth hasn't really gotten a lot of new toys to play with, as of late, but there's still definitely one of the better PvE options out there. Earth can even outdamage some elements out there, even if the enemy isn't innately weak to Earth. So what else does Earth actually need at this point? Not a lot, to be honest. Maybe a 4-hit chainer would be great. And maybe someone who could take a little bit of the debuffing load off of Noctis. Under ideal circumstances, you really only want your debuffers debuffing for 1 turn. And he actually has several at his disposal that can be nice to use. So I'll definitely be on the lookout for a unit like that in the future. And Lightning is up here next, and we're going to start out here with a core of 9S and Cloud, and this is really a great core for the element. 9S has access to an agility break, he has Drain Rush. The nice thing actually about Drain Rush is that it has 4 uses, so you can actually get 12 total hits out of 9S if you play your cards right. Cloud is actually another great PvE unit. He has access to a 25% slash and peril, and of course he has his triple slash 3-hit attack. Both of these units are actually limited time though. If you missed out on them, your Lightning setup I think is actually going to be in a pretty tough spot. So alongside 9S and Cloud here, I'm going to put in Charlotte and Velnay. And Charlotte is here because she brings that 38% lightning and peril to the team. After that, she can move on to her 2-hit pummel attacks. Now Velnay here is going to be all about the vision card ability access. She can break defense for you with the astrologer card equipped. And of course, she can have access to a gift like no other for 3-hit pierce attacks. If you don't have that though, she can 2-hit chain. She does have the monk sub job and can use pummel. Now other units that we can use to round out the team here, and I think the 5th is really going to be dependent on whether you need an agility break or not. Schutzelt actually does have that, and he can actually equip the Exorcist Vision card, so he can actually be a pretty decent 5th unit for you. Otherwise though, I think you're going to want to go for Esther. She's obviously a much better unit, and she does bring a large slash and peril on her limit burst, and she does have access to a single target resist down as well. Now unfortunately, we only have 1 Exorcist card, so only one of them is going to be able to use it, so you really have to make that choice depending on what sort of debuffs that you need. In terms of the lightning summons, the best one to use is definitely going to be Scorpion Sentinel here. And that's because its summon damage is going to be based off your physical attack. And, within our lightning team, we're dealing with all, attack-based units. If you missed out on the Final Fantasy VII event, a decent alternative would be Europa here. And that's definitely a modern summon, in terms of the field effects as well. Now, in terms of future help for the elements, we do have Lightning and Orlando coming in around the 2.5-year anniversary. And I think Lightning here from Final Fantasy XIII, definitely has the most potential, in terms of maybe an upgrade over one of these existing units. She definitely has some nice guild raid tools. She has access to slow, she has an agility break, and her limit burst is actually a lightning and peril as well. So she might actually be a good replacement for Charlotte. That limit burst is actually a 3-hit chaining attack as well. The problem though is that limit burst is actually her only multi-hit attack. And we don't currently have a chaining vision card which covers any of the jobs that she has access to. So we'll have to sort of see if we get any new chaining vision cards this year that she might be able to use, and if we do, that would definitely raise her stock quite a bit. Now moving back into the tier list here, because of some of those shortcomings that we talked about, mostly because of that big drop off after Cloud and 9S in terms of guild raid units, I'm going to have to put Lightning into my A tier. And unfortunately, at least as of now, the future definitely isn't looking super bright. There is some potential there with Final Fantasy XIII's Lightning, and we really have gotten a ton of Lightning units as of late, especially on the global side with a couple of global exclusives added in there as well. So I think they actually may be done with the Lightning element here for a little bit, and we may be waiting a little bit for Lightning stock to improve in terms of guild raids. All right, next up, so what about the water element? And water is actually in a very good position, when it comes to guild raids. And that's all starting off with Astrius here. He's got that 38% slash and peril on his limit burst, and that's going to give him access to a follow-up attack. Now, it actually works out very nicely for guild raids. That follow-up attack doesn't actually break your chain. It's not huge damage by any means, but when we're talking score attack, every little bit of damage that you can get is a big help. Now, on top of that limit burst, he does have access to slow, he has access to to a defense break as well, and he can actually natively 2-hit chain on top of that. Now next to Astrius here, I have Titus, and pretty much since he's come out, he's been known as a very, very good PvE unit, and that's really on the back of his 4-hit limit burst. Unfortunately, after that limit burst, he doesn't really have access to any other chaining attacks, but aside from that, he does have some things that he can do. He has a defense break. He does also have access to slow as well. So generally, because of that lack of innate chaining that he has, I usually use him as my summon holder and have him take out the summon. Now, on the other half of my board here, I have Winter Ramada and I have Farm, actually a couple of my favorite water units. As of now, though, Winter Ramada doesn't actually have access to her Mastery 2 ability. So unfortunately, that makes her limit burst still very, very expensive to use. So I really do hope Gumi releases that Mastery 2 for her soon. Ramada, though, does have the Ninja sub-jump, so of course she has Dream Within a Dream, and she can contribute 3-hit chaining attacks for you. Now, Farm next to her has an upgraded version of the Dream Within a Dream skill in her EX, and that actually adds a 25 defense and spirit break to it, which is very, very nice. Her limit burst, though, is very important for the water element. That's providing a 25% water imperil for the team. On top of that, she can also slow if you need it. So really nice debuffing capability here for Farm, along with the chaining that she gives you. Now, other options that you could use to add in or augment to this core above, and that's starting with Lara Croft and Glaciella. They actually both have access to 3-hit chaining innately. Next to them, we have Raychess and Winter Victora, and both of those units actually provide agility breaks. And after that, they can actually chip in with 2-hit chaining attacks when you need them. So overall, very nice roster here of units for water when it comes to guild raids. In terms of their summons, I think there's really only one clear choice, and that's going to be Leviathan. There really isn't a ton of options, when it comes to water espers, but this one actually does bring that modern utility with the 50% imperil and the 100% buff. It does bring the damage on the summon as well, so it is at least competitive with most other elements there. Now in the future section here, coming in about 3.5 months, and I actually just did a video on this guy recently, but this is Chunak, and this guy is just going to be a PvE god in my opinion. His limit burst is coming in with the 38% single target imperil, which will actually be very nice for the water element. Currently we don't have any other unit that has that type of imperil for water. That limit burst is also a 3-hit attack on top of it, so he's bringing the debuffs and starting the chain for you all at once, which is very nice. Within his main kit, he does have other options. He has a defense break that's a multi-hit, and he has 3-hit chaining natively, so very, very nice water PvE unit, and he's definitely going to raise their stock quite a bit when he comes out. So in my view, water already is in a very good position, when it comes to guild raids, so I'm going to put them in my S tier, alongside fire and earth. In terms of what water needed, they definitely needed that single target imperil, and that's exactly what Chunak is going to bring for them in a few months. So he's going to join a very strong core of native chainers, and honestly, I can see them moving up maybe even to that SS tier when he comes out. That's how good he is for PvE. Alright, so next up on the docket is the light element, and light just has an embarrassment of riches, no matter what mode that you're talking about. And in terms of their viability in guild raids, the story is really no different here. And first on my list here is going to be Elena and Violet, and what else is there to say about Elena? She has that agility break, she can 3 and 4-hit chain. Her 4-hit attack, though, can be a little bit tricky to cap the damage on, and that's really due to the lack of spirit breaks that are currently available in the light element. But in my view, she's an incredible guild raid unit, and definitely first on my list here. Violet, also very, very nice. She can defense break for you. She can 3-hit attack all day long. The crazy thing about her, though, is her reliable countering ability. And in fact, she can actually guarantee the counter attack if she dodges the enemy. And that's really not very hard for her to do with her innate evasion. So you're definitely going to be wanting to put Violet in the line of fire and making sure she can get off those counterattacks when the boss gets their turn. Now, not to be outdone here, we do have Locke and Lucio. Locke, of course, is bringing his 38% slash imperil, and he can 3-hit chain after that with his drain rush ability. Now, Locke does actually have access to slow and steal time in his kit. The issue with Locke's slow is that it doesn't contribute any damage in the fight, and you have to give up his 3-hit attack in order to equip it, so I don't really think that it's worth the trade for that. Now, finally, Lucio here, and he's definitely one of the best PvE units in the game, bar none. And of course, he is a free unit, which is actually quite amazing, and one of the reasons why light is so good. His limit burst, of course, is going to bring that 38% light imperil. He does have access to a defense break as well if you need it. And lastly, he does have native 3-hit chaining, and he can change that either to pierce or strike attacks, in addition to the slash that he has. Now, who else would you want to add or maybe augment and switch out to this core of units? I think the top 2 choices are going to be Rob and Summer Kilfei. They're both bringing the slow status for starters, and Kilfei on her limit burst does have access to the other light imperil. So if, for example, you were leveraging the defense break from Lucio, you could have Summer Kilfei bring that Imperil for you instead. The one drawback with Summer Kilfei is she doesn't have any way to get 3-hit chaining attacks currently. Rob, on the other hand, can use either of the chaining vision cards, which actually gives him some very nice flexibility there for you. Now, summons for the light elements aren't quite as good in my view. For a while now, we've been using Carbuncle. The problem with this one, though, is that when you summon it, it's healing the group and it doesn't actually do any damage to the boss. We have, though, just gotten access to a new summon with Valifor, and I think this one is going to become the preferred summon for light. And that's because this one actually matches the field effect that Carbuncle brings, but it does actually bring damage on the summon, which can help bring your score up even more. All right, so in terms of future things to look out for the light elements, look no further than Ramza. He's coming back with the Final Fantasy Tactics collaboration, which will be around the 2.5-year anniversary. And Ramza is going to be a very solid PvE option, once he gets his EX upgrades. He's going to have access to a 25 defense and spirit break all in one skill, which is very nice. And I think that will definitely help out quite a bit in terms of unlocking Elena's 4-hit Iridescent Blade skill. Ramza, on top of that, does have a 3-hit chaining attack, and it does actually have a pretty nice 176 modifier on it, which is very, very good. Now, I did put Hope here as well in the future section, and that's because he actually has a 3-hit chain on his limit burst. Aside from that, though, I don't really find him all that compelling of a guild raid unit, so I'm not sure he's really going to knock anybody else off the list here. All right, moving back into the tier list, and let's just get this out of the way quickly. Light is my SS tier. They can pull off the most guild raid damage of any element currently, and really it's not all that close. In several circumstances, it's actually the best move to run a light team, whether that boss is weak to light innately or not. A few elements here on the tier list, are going to be catching up to them over the next few months. Notably, we talked about wind, we talked about water, maybe even fire, with Delita coming. But until then, light is just kind of sitting here on the top all on its own. And I guess that just sort of figures, right? Someone over at Gumi just really, really loves the light element. All right, we still have one more to go here, and we're not forgetting about Dark. And we're going to be starting off here on the left with Dwayne and Shadow Lynx. And Dwayne definitely has several nice things going for him in terms of guild raids. He has access to a couple of different nice imperils in both the Dark Res and Slash Res down. Unfortunately, where he falls a little bit short is in his chaining abilities. He just has one single 2-hit attack on his limit burst. Having the Dragoon subjob, though, does give him access to the Gift Like No Other Vision card ability. So he's going to be able to 3-hit chain with that, assuming you have access to it. Now, next to him, I have Shadow Lynx here, and she actually may be the best Dark guild raid unit out there. She brings a 30% single target imperil, similar to Katone. And of course, being a ninja, she's able to 3-hit chain with her Dream Within a Dream ability. Again, she has very nice mobility. You can have her sitting in the back and move right up to the boss to get off her abilities without much problem. All right, so now on the right side here, we have Venera and we have Ruin Stern. And Venera, she brings a defense break. Her limit burst actually is a 3-hit slash chain as well, which is pretty nice. And then natively within her kit, she does have dual gunner, so she has the double shot ability. Now, sadly, she doesn't have access to any 3-hit chains, and she can't use any of the VCs out there that provide them. So that's kind of my one knock on her currently. Now, Stern next to her also is bringing a defense break, and he has access to 2-hit chains natively as well, similar to Venera. The difference here, though, is that he can actually use the Exorcist card, so he can get up to 3-hit chains if you need it. Now, other notables here down below for Dark, and honestly, in many cases, you'd probably run somebody like Stern here. He has a pretty nice 38% slash imperil that he can bring from his EX job, and he can actually use either of the chaining vision cards as well, so that's pretty nice to have that flexibility on him. I think that choice of who else you bring might be dependent on the boss that you're up against, though. If you need something like an agility break or a slow, Prompto is going to be your best choice there. He has access to both of those abilities. Prompto does have access to a 3-hit on his limit burst as well. In terms of bringing out a summon for the Dark element, Anima and Omega are definitely the best options. If you don't have them, Diabolos can be decent enough as well. For future units for Dark, we do actually have one who I think is going to be very, very good, and that's Renelle. We should actually be getting her very, very soon. She's actually going to be a free MR unit, just like McLeod, and she natively has a 3-hit chaining attack that has a pretty nice modifier on it. She does also have an agility break with her sniper subjob, so I think she's going to be a big help for an element that's really lacking right now in native 3-hit chainers. I do have Dark Fina here as well. She's probably most notable for a 4-hit limit burst attack that she has, and after that she actually has a 2-hit magic attack that she could use. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to knock off any of these other units, but the potential is there and maybe it's something to test out. All right, so that said, where does Dark show up on my tier list? And sadly, I am going to have to put them at the bottom, in my B tier. Once they get Renelle, I think that's definitely going to help them out quite a bit, as we were just talking about. And I think that's going to probably push them up to the A tier for me. They really do need, though, another native 3-hit chainer, preferably a slash chainer that maybe has some decent debuffs. And I think if they get that on top of Renelle, that would definitely push them into the S tier for me. I don't really expect to see another Dark unit anytime soon, though. We've already gotten quite a few this year, and we actually have another one coming soon in Dark Fina. So we actually could be waiting a minute, for any sort of Dark upgrade to happen in terms of their guild raid status. Alright, so that's going to be the end of part 2 in my definitive guide to guild raids. I really tried to cover just about everything I could think of here to truly live up to that definitive tag, so I really hope that you agree. If this is a topic that you liked me covering, definitely let me know. I can make future updates to this series and sort of maintain the tier list, as we go forward. If people are interested in those infographics I made for each element in terms of showing the units and their capabilities to use for your own personal reference or maybe to post in Discord, I will make those publicly available and I'll put a link to those in the description. If you end up using those, the only thing that I ask is maybe throw a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and maybe share this video out here with your guilds and help support the channel grow. As always, definitely hit me up in the comments as well and let me know any feedback or improvements that you guys may have. I've really put a lot of work into these last 2 videos and I really hope that they've been helpful for you guys. And that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.